Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Sekia breakfast. The bell has tolled and it's time to start. I'm Bill Smith, president of the Seidman Alumni Association. We jointly put on the Sekia breakfast 3 times a year in conjunction with Peter Sekia and his wife Joan. And we appreciate the fact that they have allowed us to continue to do this and help us fund this. Peter, unfortunately, could not be here today, so he told me to say, send my best wishes at 82 plus 1 week. So he just had a birthday. And so maybe a quick applause for Peter and Joan. And we've fortunately been able to do these for years. And we have a lot of students here today, which is really great. And that's one of the things that Peter likes. Could the students just stand for a moment so everybody can get these are our future leaders. Thank you very much. That's phenomenal. I have taught adjunct here now for 34 years. It's hard to believe. And I always encourage the students to come to these breakfasts and then our Seidman socials because there's so much insight that they can get here that they can't get in the classroom. So we're really privileged, Seidman, to be able to have this. I'd like to acknowledge a few people here. Today we have Tom Haas, President Tom Haas. Vice Chair, Board of Trustees, Megan Saul. Past Chair, Board of Trustees, John Kennedy. And our Provost, Maria Chemtilli. And Maria, you just have to know, and Bonnie just sits there and shudders. With a name like Bill Smith, I always worry about those names. So, okay, good. And then today's program is going to be pretty interesting. Distinguished speaker Gerry Anderson, and we're going to end in a Q&A with J.D. Collins, our innovative and strategic business leader who serves as director of the Seidman, Michigan Small Business Development Association. And JD, I just learned something in the last month. So I was talking to a few of my peers and I was talking about using this new EOS, it's not new anymore, traction system. And they said, you can get that from Grand Valley. And I had no idea. So we're now working with SBDC with my company CompuCraft. So that's pretty cool. Amy Sparks. Amy Sparks is a distinguished alumna. She's president of her own company, Nuvar. That's a thriving business in Holland. And I would like to invite Amy up to introduce our speaker today.
Well, good morning. It's both my pleasure and my honor today to introduce our speaker this morning, whose topic is Leading with Purpose, How I Discovered the Soft Side of Business is the Hard Side. A brief background on our speaker. Gerry Anderson is the chairman and CEO of DTE Energy. Gerry earned a degree in civil engineering from the University of Notre Dame and went on to pursue master's degrees in both business administration and public policy from the University of Michigan. Go Blue. He started his career working in more technical areas of business, including engineering, economic forecasting, and management consulting. In 1993, Gerry joined DTE to establish its non-utility businesses, which now operate in 22 states across the country. He has since held various senior executive leadership roles throughout the enterprise, leading up to his current role. While DTE is known for its electric and natural gas utilities that power the state, including natural gas services to our community, the company is also one of Michigan's leading corporate citizens, actively involved in 450 communities in a variety of ways, including philanthropy, volunteerism, and economic development. Gerry is also the chairman of the Edison Electric Institute's Committee on Environment. In that role, he worked with both the Bush and Obama administrations on clean air policy and has made significant contributions positioning the energy industry as a leader in combating climate change. When Gerry is not tackling the challenges of renewable energy, climate change, finding environmentally friendly technologies, in addition to his mere duties as a CEO. He also dedicates a significant portion of his time to a variety of organizations that aim to improve our great state. 2 years ago, he organized a CEO group in Southeast Michigan, establishing the Detroit Regional Partnership that will mirror the right place in its activities and focus. A few of his other priorities include the Detroit Economic Club, Business Leaders of Michigan, the Downtown Detroit Partnership, and the West Michigan Policy Forum. In his spare time outside of work, Gerry somehow generates more than 24 hours in a day. I'm thinking that must be a perk of working for an energy company, right? Gerry is married. He has 3 sons, and I learned this morning as a family, they love to vacation. And if you want to find them, you'll have to go hiking in the mountains somewhere. As many of us in this room know, the greatest assets of our businesses are our people. The real key to success is unlocking the potential and passion that lives within them and getting our teams to move forward together towards a common purpose. My executive team and I feel the challenge of doing that with 160 employees, let alone the over 10,400 Gerry is passionate about leading at DTE. So without further delay, let's get Gerry up here so we can learn some best practices of how to connect people to a higher purpose, inspire them to bring more energy and creativity to their jobs, raise their game, and increase our collective success. Welcome, Gerry. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Amy. That was a wonderful introduction. I just want to start by saying how impressed I am at this gathering. I've mentioned to a couple of people, I have never spoken to a group that mixes students, faculty, and business in the way that this group is mixed. Typically, it's a group of students or a group of business leaders. This is a unique mix, and you should be really proud of what you have going here. So Amy mentioned my topic, leading with purpose, or how I discovered that the soft side of business is actually the hard side. That was something I had to discover because I was trained in the hard side. So she mentioned some of my background. I studied engineering and physics at Notre Dame, went off and practiced that for a while, came back to graduate school, business with a finance concentration, public policy with an economics focus, headed off to McKinsey & Company, the management consulting firm. You know what they're like. It's all about strategy, problem solving, analytics, finance. Came to DTE, actually not at first to be part of the utilities, but to start new businesses. So that was markets and entrepreneurism and finance. Those were the skills that kind of took me up through the early part of my career. Eventually, I did move into the utility. My first job was, I was handed the power plant organization, which is big assets, intensive operations. So I was trained in the hard side. By 2006, I was president and COO at DTE. That was the first time I'd say I felt responsible for the company as a whole. I'd always been responsible for a piece of the company, but now I felt that the overall company in a way reflected me. And when I looked around, I have to admit it wasn't a pretty picture. I'd just say we were a thoroughly mediocre company. And in many ways, maybe that's being generous. Our safety record was poor in the industry, our industrial safety. Our customer service, J.D. Powers, had us ranked typically near the bottom of our peer group in the Midwest. Of 15 or 16 companies, we usually occupied one of the bottom 2 spots. Our costs benchmarked poorly, always below average, often in the 4th quartile. We didn't have good cost discipline. Total shareholder return consistently showed up in the 4th quartile of our peer group. I can remember the day that 2 leaders came in early in my career as president, closed the door and said, "You got to do something about this. It's just embarrassing to keep showing up at the bottom of these total shareholder return lists." Not to mention that our long-term incentive plans never paid out because of that. But perhaps most conspicuously was the engagement of our employees. So we had been measuring engagement, which is just another word for the energy that your people have for the company. We'd been measuring it for years, and it too typically showed up in the bottom quartile, sometimes worse. And all of this, I think, was sort of layered over with what I described at the time as a bit of a culture of excuses. Well, we operate in Michigan. Michigan is a declining economy. We operate in Detroit. Detroit is a broken city. It was at the time. It's not anymore. And this all makes it very difficult for us to be excellent. So these things are simply a reflection of the circumstances within which we operate, et cetera, et cetera. Excuses, you excuse yourself and all performance goes right out the window. So as I thought about it further, I decided in my new role, it was my job to fix this and try to drive excellence. I needed to go after this mediocrity that characterized our company, and I did it in a way that I understood at the time. So I had done turnaround efforts as part of McKinsey. I'd gone into companies and led cost takeout and performance improvement efforts. So that's what we did. We gave it a name, the Performance Excellence Process. I called in each leader of the company and said, here's the plan. Every one of us is going to benchmark our performance. We're going to understand what great looks like, and we're going to develop a plan, and we're going to be there in 3 years. And we're going to be serious about this and prove to ourselves that we can lift ourselves out of this poor performance. So we launched it. Most of 2006 was consumed in that. And in 2007, when I stepped back and looked at the results, I'd say a couple things. First, in many ways it worked. Our costs were different. Our performance had moved, but something else moved too. The engagement of our people, even lower. So an already bad result tanked even further. And as I understood why, I found out that our people really hated the experience. They found it top down, outside in, and frightening. Felt out of control for them. They didn't know what it meant for their futures. And I found myself asking, as I looked forward, is this what I want my career to be? Every 2 or 3 years, I pulse the company with some sort of punch to, let's go. And I decided that wasn't the future I wanted. And so I began for the first time to really think seriously about continuous improvement. So we all know that language, we've all learned about it, but I hadn't studied it seriously. But I was looking for a way to improve the company continuously over time with our people at the center of that, rather than feeling like it was being imposed on them. I remember giving a speech in late 2007 to our people and saying, I've come to 2 conclusions. One, the very root cause of our issues at our company is our culture. We have a broken culture. And second, I think continuous improvement has to be at the heart of how we're going to fix that. I don't think the leaders quite believed me, to be honest. I actually used those clickers to say, how many of you believe continuous improvement will be part of our future in 5 years? And half said yes, and the other half voted no. They thought this too would pass. So I entered 2008 with a focus on building a winning culture at the company and figuring out how to embed continuous improvement within the company. Now, to be honest, I said that I thought the problem was a broken culture. I had no idea how to shape a culture in 10,000 people. I hardly knew what that meant. I sensed that was the problem, but I didn't know what to do about it. I remember going off to experts and talking to them about culture. Wasn't very helpful. I also learned some things about continuous improvement that were foundational, in particular one principle, which I didn't understand at first. The principle was at its core, continuous improvement must have a deep respect for the dignity of people. As a person brought up through the hard side, I sort of understood that, but not really. Maybe a cruder interpretation of that would be, if you want to ask people for their best energy and creativity and focus, you want them to bring your best to you, you have to be for the best in their future, or it's not a fair exchange. Or put even more crudely, you can't ask people to come and bring productivity and efficiency to your company and then say, thank you very much, by the way, we don't need you anymore, so see ya. That's an exchange that really doesn't work. And so I absorbed that principle, this principle that at the core of continuous improvement, you better have a deep respect for people and what is important to them. But my lessons in leadership really started in late 2008. So late 2008 was the onset of the Great Recession. And I remember that today like it happened yesterday. So we spent all year, like we normally do, planning for 2009. And then in the fall of 2008, the stilts under the international economy began to wobble. And it was, what was really strange for us is that we were at ground zero in that wobbling. We were in Detroit, which turned out to be the epicenter of the crisis. People began to talk about DTE Energy being thrown on the scrap heap of companies in Michigan. We're going to be a junk bond utility as a result of all of this. And I remember pulling our leadership team together and saying, everything we've done to plan for next year is just history. We're going to have to completely remake the plan. This was around Thanksgiving. So I said, go home, enjoy Thanksgiving. When we come back, we've got 10 days to put together a new plan. So the first job was to size how big what was coming at us was, and that was hard to do, but as best we could tell, a couple $100 million had just walked out the door. That would have turned us into a junk bond utility. And so I said, we can't let that happen. We've got to come up with a plan to offset the $200 million. We got 10 days to do it. 2 days later, two senior leaders, the head of our electric utility and the head of HR operations, came to me and said, we've done the math. There is absolutely no way to save that kind of money without a really large layoff, probably 20% of our employee population. Now I stared that continuous improvement principle right in the face, because I knew that if we walked away from our employees at their moment of greatest risk, that would define our culture for certainly the duration of my career. And that if I ever said to them in the future, don't worry, in doing this work for us, you're not at risk, they would say, I don't believe you, because at my point of greatest risk, you walked away from me. And so I knew I was facing a defining decision of my career. What we decided to do as a team was to do the opposite. And I created what I look back on was a rather crude video to communicate with our employees, but I must say they all watched it with great interest because of what we were talking about. And what I communicated was this. I said, as big as this is, I can't promise you anything, but I will make this promise. The last lever we'll pull at this company to deal with this and keep our company healthy is to lay anyone off. But if I'm to make good on that promise, I need one from you, that you will bring every ounce of energy, creativity, and focus to keeping this company healthy that you can. And if you make good on that, I have a chance of making good on my promise. So we went into 2009. I know I was holding my breath. I told my wife that Christmas, I really hope this works, because it was very hard to do the math on something like that. I couldn't do the hard side discipline of making all the numbers foot. January, my controller at the time, a guy named Peter Alexiak, who's now the company's CFO, came to me after a month in 2009 and said, hey, guess what? We beat our budget. February, beat the budget. March, we wrapped up the first quarter, and Peter came in and said, hey, we beat the budget all 3 months and beat the quarterly number. And it was the first time I said, Peter, you better check your financial close model. I think you got a break in it. It wasn't adding up. April, GM is spiraling into the government's arms. Chrysler headed toward bankruptcy. Steel mills shut down all around us. Auto plants closed. We beat the budget in April. Beat the budget in May. Mid-year, Peter comes into my office and says, we're well ahead of plan halfway through the year. And I said to him again, Peter, you got a break in your model. Find it. I don't think I do, but I'll look for it. July, beat budget. In August, I was at our cottage in Grand Haven, and it was cool. I was on the beach in a sweatshirt. I thought, this is it. This is the month we get creamed, because we sell a lot of air conditioning. Peter came to me in early September and said, we beat the budget in August. And I said, Peter, your model is broken. Find it. And Peter got agitated with me and said, Gerry, there's nothing wrong with my model. This is just what's happening. And it was at that point that I accepted for the first time that the request that we'd put out there of our employees was being delivered on in a way that was nonlinear and sort of outside of my experience. And then I went looking for it and found it in thousands of small acts that employees were delivering on. And to make a long story short, when I met with our board of directors at the end of 2009 to give myself a valuation in December of that year, I said to them, I have learned far more in 2009 than I have in any year of my career, and everything I've learned is about people and what they're capable of if they really commit themselves to something. Well, I was named CEO as 2010 rolled in, and we were still in the heart of the economic crisis. We'd come through 2009 with flying colors. We actually held an analyst conference in the fall of 2009 and told them we're raising our earnings guidance materially. Turned out to be the strongest cash flow year in the company's history. How could that happen in the middle of the economic crisis? It just didn't compute. So as I took the role of CEO, I thought, I really don't want 2009 to be my proudest year that I can look back on and say, that was great. Everything that came after it was sort of downhill. But I wondered, how do we excel and bring that sort of energy level as this crisis fades? Because it was the crisis that was pulling that energy in many ways. And I had a breakfast in early 2010. I meet monthly with 12 employees over breakfast, and just to get their input and opinions. And after breakfast, there was a woman waiting in the corner. I could tell she wanted to talk. So I said goodbye to the rest of the breakfast participants and walked over to her, and we chit-chatted for a bit. And then she said, well, I stayed behind because I never had a proper chance to thank you for what you and the company did this past year. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, look, I have 3 young children, and my husband was laid off. And I was deathly afraid of what would happen to our family if I were laid off too. And when the company came forward and said, we're not going to lay people off if you make good on your commitment, you gave me hope. And I could literally say you kept food on our table. And as I listened to her, I realized, no wonder we got people's best energy. When a mother is fighting for her children, that brings a level of discretionary energy that is way beyond what I could ever predict. But then she said something really interesting. She said, Gerry, we're okay at DTE. We've made it through. There's a lot of people around us who aren't okay. I think her husband was still laid off. Our communities in the Detroit area were still a wreck. And she asked, what can we do to help them? And I looked at her and realized she'd just given me the answer to the next step, that our people's energy was going to begin to turn outward to how they could help other people, and that they cared deeply about that, and that if we could attach our company to that energy, we would continue to perform the way we had through the crisis. And so I began to talk to our people about the fact that, look, I know you all want to help heal this state the city. The most powerful vehicle you have to do that is DTE Energy. Make this company great. Everybody pays our bills. Make it more efficient, be more productive, lighten their load. Outsiders look in Michigan and assume mediocrity and terrible companies. Be the opposite of that. Make us the best operated energy company in the country. We invest more money every year in this state than any other company, and that's true. Let's use that to be a force for growth and prosperity and economic development in the communities that need it. Our people latched onto that as a way that they could help the rest of the Detroit community and the rest of the state. Well, interestingly, in the middle of that year, our Gallup score, which is Gallup measures our engagement scores, in the wake of 2009 and early 2010, jumped for the first time in our history. Now it jumped above median, wasn't elite, but it wasn't in the basement anymore. So we had our people's energy on the upswing. And as I played through 2010, I found myself asking, how do we continue that? In early 2007, I went down to Texas to visit the operation of one of our board members. His name is Joe Robles. Joe at the time was CEO of USAA. USAA probably knows the company that serves the military and families of the military. And they are a really good operation, especially at customer service. And we were there to benchmark customer service operations. And so we met in Joe's office early in the morning and talked a bit. And then Joe said, let's go see our operations. And we walked out into one of his call centers, and Joe was pointing out details of the operation. And all I could focus on was his people. Almost to a person, when I was introduced with someone, a big smile came across their face. They stuck out their hands. Welcome to Texas, Mr. Anderson. The energy was just palpable. We walked back into Joe's office, and he was ready to talk customer service operations. And I said, Joe, how do you produce that? And he looked at me puzzled and said, what? I said, your people, the energy that they have. How do you produce that? He sort of set down his papers and said, Gerry, the first job of any leader is to connect people to purpose. I said, that's your job. He said, that's a hard job you saw those people doing out there in the call center, answering phones all day, every day. Often the person they have on the other end of the line is impatient. My job is to remind them just how important that person might be. Might be somebody who's deployed overseas, might be their spouse, might be somebody who's served this country in an amazing way in the past. And those people deserve our best, and I have to connect our people to that. And then he brought out little video clips that showed the stories of the people that they were serving. And these clips brought tears to your eyes. We didn't even work there. And I thought, I get what he's saying. He's connecting people in mundane daily activities to the importance of what they're doing and helping them remember that as they go through that routine activity. So we flew home that night, we talked. We should be able to do that. What we do is important. We provide some of the most fundamental inputs to modern life that there are, energy. And doing that well and doing it sustainably is a really important role. So we decided to make our own purpose video to see if it worked with our people. I have to tell you, as a person trained up in the hard side, I found myself debating whether this was really going to work or I was going to be totally embarrassed by something that went out there and flopped. Well, we showed it first to a group of a couple hundred leaders, and we turned out the lights and ran the film, and when it was over, there was a moment of quiet and then an eruptive standing ovation with people asking, when can we get that film to take it to our people? We took it next to a group of 2,000 to 3,000 in what we call our town hall. Same experience. And then I got an email, I remember, from a woman who ran one of our power plants at the time, said, Gerry, I showed it in our power plant, and there were men who've worked here for 20 or 30 years in dirty overalls, and when I turned on the lights, they were rubbing tears out of their eyes. And I realized that perhaps for the first time, some of our people were being thanked for the fact that the work they've thrown their life energy into was really important. Well, in 2012, following that year of 2011, we won the Gallup Great Workplace Award for the first time. Gallup's Great Workplace Award is reserved for companies that have entered the top 10% of their engagement statistics. We were the first utility to earn it, and I remember thinking in 2012, we're a long way from that experience of 2007, when our engagement had tanked, or people's energy had tanked in the wake of the performance excellence process. Sort of the last step was our unions. We were a very unionized culture in Detroit, and as our people's engagement scores moved, our unions moved too, but they lagged. We began to talk about this gap between our union employees and our non-union, and it made no sense. We're all people. And so we began to talk about how we deal with that, and one day I was scheduled at a meeting with our union leadership, our presidents and their staff of the unions, to speak on the topic of purpose. I walked into the meeting, we opened the meeting with a safety discussion, and we just had the best safety quarter in our company's history. I thought it was going to be a cause for celebration, but when the layout of the safety results was over, arguments ensued. Arguments about, well, this practice or this investment needed. And I remember, quite frankly, I was just sort of pissed. And I walked to the back of the room, shaking my head. I thought, what is going on here? We just had the best result in history, and we're arguing with each other. And the guy who ran HR operations saw me walk to the back of the room and came to me, and I was supposed to speak on purpose. I said, Larry, I am not talking about purpose in this environment. And he said, but Gerry, that's the whole agenda. I said, well, cancel the meeting then. I'm not talking about it. And he said, we can't do that. People have driven from all over the state. I said, Larry, I'm not talking about it. I said, I don't even know what we're doing at these meetings. And he looked at me and said, maybe you should talk about that. And so that's what we did. I walked to the front of the room and said, I don't know what I just witnessed. Why are we arguing about this? What are we doing at these meetings? I said, look, agenda's scrapped. Here's the new agenda. Each table will talk about why are we here and what useful can we do in these conversations. And at the end of that discussion, we came away with two things. We're going to work on two things together. Engagement of our people, and what we agreed is the lagging engagement of union employees was a poor reflection on the leadership of the company, including me, but it was also a poor reflection on the leadership of the unions. We owned that together. And we were going to work on safety. Engagement and safety was the agenda. We've been working that agenda with our unions ever since. In many ways, it's transformed our relationship. Our unions, by the way, today as a standalone group are 90th percentile. When we started back in 2007, they were 9th percentile. I can't tell you what a difference it is to work with people who move from 9th to 90th. It's an amazing difference. So where are we today? We just received our most recent Gallup results in late 2018. We were 97th percentile as a company. And as I said, our unions were 90th. We've won 7 straight Gallup Great Workplace Awards. We're one of, Gallup's been doing this for 25 years or more. We're one of 10 companies internationally over that time that have won 7 straight. So we're a long way from that legacy of 4th quartile energy today. It is so different. You can talk about this in numbers, but the most tangible way is just the feeling. I much more often have the feeling of walking into Joe Robles' call center, where people smile and are energetic and shake my hand and are positive. And that bleeds into everything you do at a company. I had a president retire a few years ago, and in his departing speech said, you know, I used to hate to go talk to our people. It was depressing. He said, today when I'm down, I go talk to our people. They give me a lift. You see it in small personal interactions. I ran into a person at the bottom of an escalator some time back. I shook his hand and said, hi, how are you? How long have you been at the company? He said, I've been here a year. I said, how is it? He said, sir, I knew he was military then. Sir, it's been transformative. said, why? Transformative, why? I said, well, I was deployed overseas and then came home and was unemployed. You ran a boot camp, and I entered the boot camp. I learned the skills, and now I'm working in your gas operations. I really like the people and I really like the work, but what's most important is before I had a young family I couldn't help support, and now I can. It's been transformative. And I looked at him and thought, you know, when a person says that their experience of just everyday work has been transformative to their life, they'll give you a level of discretionary energy that is very, very high. So how does this turn into hard numbers? Well, so Mark Murray is here. He's on our board. So Mark heard a lot of this in my self-evaluation this past December. But in 2018, our safety results were best in the industry. So that is a long way from where they were. Our customer service usually now shows up number 1 or number 2 in the Midwest in J.D. Power's surveys. Our costs, we've now got a reputation for some of the best cost management in the industry. We've had flat costs for a decade, and the average company is up 40%. And our total shareholder return for the 10 years that I just described was up 275%, and the S&P Utilities Index was up 83. So about a 3 times multiplier. So what do I learn from all of that? I think Peter Drucker was right. Culture does eat strategy for breakfast. You can have a great strategy and all sorts of great ideas, and if your people and their energy aren't with you, it's over. But if they're with you, it's like, you know, taking your boat downstream. The water's with you, everything's easier. You got a weak culture, it's like paddling upstream, it's really hard. At its heart, a company's a collection of people, and it's shaped by the energy that they're willing to invest in your company. And you cannot be a great enterprise of any sort with mediocre or poor energy. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to understand that, although it took me a long time to get there. But it's simply true, whether you're running a company or a sports team or a symphony orchestra. Great energy and great commitment lead to great results. But people only give their best energy, their discretionary energy, to things that they believe in, things that they care deeply about, or perhaps things that they love. And so the first job of leaders is to create a company or an enterprise that people are proud of, that people believe in, and perhaps even people love. And so that's why I say, looking back, that I learned over time that it really is the soft side of business that is the hard side and the most important side of what we do. Thanks very much. I look forward to some questions.
Thanks for that, Gerry. That was outstanding.
Thank you.
So, Gerry, I've had the opportunity to get to know you a little bit, do some research, and I will tell you that I reached out to the faculty, the staff, and the students for questions, and my initial questions were written down, typed up, and as you can see,
they're all written over now.
It's all messed up already. But we do have a very special group of students here with us today, and we have students that are within days, if not weeks, from graduating. And so as you look to that crowd, do you have some advice for them as they enter the business world about the softer and the harder side of business?
Well, I guess one comment I'd make is that I don't mean to imply that the hard skills aren't important. They are. So if you're studying accounting or sales or marketing, being excellent at that, being really competent is important. That earns you your credibility and in many ways is your contribution. But the other thing I would say is start early to learn the skills of leading other people. You know, I often say to our people, we don't lead balance sheets and machines. We lead people. And there's a skill to that you can learn. And you can develop over time just like any other skill. And the earlier you start on it, the more natural it will become as you grow in responsibility into roles where you're leading large groups of people. So I guess two pieces of advice would be deliver on the hard side, but think early about opportunities to build your leadership and people skills. It'll really serve you extremely well long term.
Thanks, Gerry. Why don't you think all executives lead this way? And as a follow-up to that as well, from the faculty side, is there a method to teach this skill?
You know, why don't all leaders lead this way? I mean, I could ask that of myself. You know, why did I have to learn it in the way I described? We aren't taught this. In fact, we're inculcated in a business discipline. This, I won't say teaches the opposite, but there's an awful lot of feed that business is finance, business is M&A, business is deals, business is growth. It is all those things. But there isn't an equal emphasis on business ultimately being about people coming together to serve other people in a way that's meaningful. And that the job of companies and leaders is to create that. And so a lot of us grow up thinking being in business means that hard or left side of the picture, and I should be 90% plus about that. And I'm a good person, and you know I'll be kind to people, but we just aren't trained the other way. I had to battle as I went through this, constant voices in my head saying, "Get back to work, the real work. You know, you should be off thinking about a deal or working on a transaction," and needed to keep pulling myself back to a belief that my real leverage was now in the energy of our people. And what helped me understand it, and maybe that's for the faculty, was seeing what it delivered, seeing what a huge difference it made in the results of the company, and had to keep reminding myself that this really is the engine. This is everything. So put the voices in your head aside and focus first on what's most important. And so I think, you know, the more faculty can help students early see the evidence that this actually is the most important, it may lodge in a way that's a little different today than what's done today.
I'll tell you, I was really touched by your story of 2008, specifically of the mother who came to you and explained their family situation. I think at that point you realized your connection in the community, and you can't go online today and type in DTE and not see a treasure trove of awards that you've been given. One that came up to me was this Points of Light, and it's given to the world's organization that are dedicated to volunteer service, and it recognized DTE as one of the top 50 community-minded companies. Can you talk a little bit more about that, the shift that you went through and the dedication you now see in the community? Because I think it started with people, then it shifted to community.
Yeah, that's true. Well, in a lot of ways, the community is an expression of the people. That in the crisis, the energy was appropriately focused inward at making sure the company was okay, but then focused outward, and that be the best operated energy company and a force for growth in our communities became what we call our aspiration today. Now, lots of aspirations are posters on the wall and don't mean anything, but because of where that came from, it was very meaningful. But what we found over time is we were better at focusing on the best operated energy company than we were on force for growth and prosperity, even though we wanted to be that and our people wanted to be that. We didn't have any systems or disciplines that led us into real activity in our communities. And so we began to say, if we want to do this, we need to treat our plan for growth and prosperity the same way we treat our financial or operating plan. And so we began to develop community engagement plans that were much more detailed than we'd had before. And look, I'm not in any of this trying to suggest any degree of perfection. We have lots of things we can improve and make better. Every company does. But our engagement in the community has really moved, and our people love it. When you go, these breakfasts I have, often a quarter of the breakfast will be on the company's engagement with various parts of the community because it's meaningful to the employees to see that the company stands for this and is participating in it. And to the degree they can be part of it, all the better. So it was an aspiration at first, but one that we found a hard time operationalizing, and then realized if we're going to operationalize this, we have to do it the same way we do everything else in a company. Plan for it, have a strategic plan, have execution points, and go do it. And so I was pleased last year when Points of Light recognized that. As much as anything, I think it's an indicator to our people that all the work you're doing is showing up.
And I think you've taken this to a personal level as well. You had mentioned a CEO group in Detroit that you lead. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was interesting. So in the wake of the economic crisis, the companies, every company in Detroit went deeply inward. And I would say, in a way, the community fabric was evacuated by a lot of companies. And there's no blame there, it was appropriate. Yeah. But as the city went on the upswing, there was nowhere that the senior leadership of large companies came together to try to put their shoulders behind that. And I got involved in an issue trying to create an economic development organization in a region that has historically been very divisive, to be quite frank, around trying to work together, and realized that it was going to take more than a few of us to have the force to make this happen. And I was at that point that I thought we need to get together the senior leaders of the largest companies and as a group say this needs to happen. So I went out and asked CEOs of GM and Ford and Roger Penske and Chris Illich and Gilbert and people like that. And the reaction was, yes, we're in, but the agenda ought to be much larger than economic development, youth employment, workforce engagement, education, placemaking, and topics like this. So about a half dozen topics we work. And so we, a couple years ago, began to meet as a team. And by the way, we invited the presidents of the two largest foundations, Kresge and Ralph Wilson, to sit in the group too. And I think they really value the ability to come together in a trusted small group of peers to talk about not a business agenda, but a community agenda. What can we do to help improve the community? And 2 years in, this is principals only, so it's CEOs or nobody that show up. And we had a meeting just about a week and a half ago, and 15 of 16 were there and pitching. So it's been an encouraging thing for me to see for the city, for that group to come together.
No doubt that level of engagement's amazing.
Yeah, it's a good thing.
I'd like to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about corporate responsibility when it comes to carbon emissions.
Yeah.
Once again, DTE has been recognized time and time again for your positive commitment to reducing carbon emissions. I think you have a lofty goal of reducing carbon emissions by 80% by 2050. And
2040.
And you've recently
pulled it in.
Pulled it in. Will you talk a little bit about that commitment level and the role that plays?
Yeah, and I see we've got maybe 5 minutes left or so, is that right? Yeah, just want to keep an eye on time. It was mentioned in the introduction that I chair the Industry's Environment Committee, and I've done that for maybe 15 years. And so in 2015 and 16, my role was to sort of be the industry's point on the Clean Power Plan. And my job was to try to pull together companies like mine from all over the country around one position, which was not easy to do, given that every state has its own politics and every company has its own issues. But we eventually got there, and it was what was embodied in the Clean Power Plan. And then, of course, the election happened and the Clean Power Plan was pitched. And I remember saying to my wife, I feel like I invested like a year of my life and just had it thrown out the window. But in the wake of that, then there were just all sorts of questions coming in about, is the country going to go backwards environmentally? Are we really going to see this vast resurgence of coal-fired generation? And the truth of the matter was we weren't. And I also had learned through the process of trying to bring the industry together that technologies in And energy sources had changed in a way that we could actually address climate change in a very fundamental way and do that in a way that's affordably. So my senior team and I sat down and discussed, look, what do we think our responsibility is? Apart from the regulations, which are now shelved, what do we believe? And we rallied around a belief that this is one of the most important public policy issues that the international community faces, and we're in the middle of it, so we should be right at the heart of the solution. So it felt a little dangerous early in the Trump administration to come out because it wasn't necessarily a popular position we were going to take with the administration, but we came out in early 17 and said we were going to reduce carbon emissions 80% by 2050 and then set nearer term markers. We were careful to manage the communications of that because we were worried, but it actually turned out the opposite. It was overwhelmingly positively received. I think covered in 200 news articles across the country just because it was the time that it came out. And was well received by Republicans and Democrats, both at the state level and at the federal level, for different reasons. Republicans said, shows we don't need regulation, they're going to do it without it, and Democrats were just like, this is what we want. But it was well received. And then since then, we've continued to study solar and wind technologies, continue to evolve and advance. Natural gas, which was once thought to be running out, is plentiful and very low carbon. Combination of those two gives us the ability to really move on this. So what's interesting now, and something I tell you can spread the word on, is I don't look back at the Clean Power Plan being set aside as any issue, because we're going to blow by it so quickly and so far that it's going to surprise people. So the Clean Power Plan asked for us to be down about 30% by 2030. We've committed to be down 50 by 2030. There was no long-term portion of the Clean Power Plan, but we've committed to be down 80 10 years later. And we won't be unique in the industry. The industry is flipping. The electric industry is from we should be worried about climate change to a realization that actually this is a tremendous opportunity to do what we do, which is invest in infrastructure, clean infrastructure to create the future. And if the world is going to decarbonize, it's going to be by electrifying. So this in many ways is, yeah. It's a tremendous opportunity for the industry to grow and be part of something exciting. And you talk about engagement. I remember a really talented woman writing me after we made that announcement saying, I read the announcement and it brought me to tears because this is what I believe in. And I thought again, that pulls people's energy if a company stands for things that its employees believe in. So look, we wouldn't have said we could do it if we didn't believe we could do it affordably and reliably. We sort of did the hard side engineering and math, financial math, but then we got out and took a position. And interesting, the industry as a whole is migrating there, and we're going to blow away the Clean Power Plan numbers. That's a good thing.
That's fantastic news. Will you talk a little bit about the role of renewables in that plan as well?
So we're investing hard and heavy in renewables. So we just put out a plan where we'll invest a couple $2 billion more in renewables to double our renewable base by about 2023. But then when you look at our plan beyond that, the long-term plan, it's dominated by just continued investments in renewable energy. We are also investing in a natural gas plant because in Michigan, there are periods where the wind isn't blowing, the sun's not shining, and we need reliability too. But the gas plant we're investing in is 70% lower in carbon and much cleaner than the coal plants that they're helping to replace. So the combination, when you do the math of heavy investments in renewables and enough gas to keep our reliability, gets you to very fundamental reductions in carbon. And of course, we're trying to set ourselves up for the next big evolution, which will be when the auto industry tilts into electric vehicles and draws on that energy source, a clean energy source, to fill up their batteries.
Gerry, this has been fantastic, and I think President Haas has a little token of our appreciation for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Oh, that was wonderful. I'm going to start off. Those students that are graduating in a week and a half, go ahead and stand up. Who's graduating? Thank you. Leaders of character right here, Gerry. This is the future, as you said. It was great. I also want to start off with a thank you.